Hi, in this video, I would like to give a non-technical explanation of the blockchain and help some of the people who are just getting into the field understand what it is, how it works, and hopefully I can get you a little bit excited about the potential that it can provide. So, in order to understand what the blockchain is, let's look at the definition. It is a peer-to-peer decentralized ledger. By ledger, we mean a log. So it's the log of all the transactions that have taken place in a specific cryptocurrency. Let's look through all the components piece by piece. Peer-to-peer is this notion that some data is being shared from one person to another. And a good example of this is the torrent system. So if I want to download an MP3 file, I will need to find a torrent file that has information about this song. Then I will download it on my computer and I will use my software of choice, let's say mTorrent, to download it. What mTorrent will do, it will look to the network and find people who are willing to share it with me. It will then download it from them to my computer and I will have the song. The significance of this system is that I didn't have to go to any single entity or a website to download the song. Rather, I downloaded it from other people's computers. And as long as at least one person has the song and is willing to share it, the song will not disappear from the internet. And blockchains use the same peer-to-peer technology to transmit transactions like that. So let's look into the second part, which is the decentralization. But first, in order to understand that, let's look at the contrary. Let's look at the centralized example, like PayPal, for example. So PayPal, what they will do is they have a database where they store information about their users. They will store your transaction history, your billing address, bank information, etc. And you can maybe start suspecting how this system is a bit problematic, as such a large entity has millions of users' sensitive data concentrated in one place. So people decided that they want to create a decentralized, meaning no single entity has control over your money. So decentralized monetary system. And in such a system, every person controls their own money and they can also validate the transactions of others. So let's dive into the system and look how it works. So for the sake of this video, I will use Bitcoin as the cryptocurrency, and all the transactions I will be talking about will be Bitcoin. So here we have 4 people participating in the network. And each of them runs a specific Bitcoin software that will listen to the network for transactions. Just like mTorrent is listening for torrents, the Bitcoin software will listen for transactions that happen and log them. So let's have an example of a transaction. A sends Bitcoin to B. Initially, A had received 1 Bitcoin from a friend, and now A sends 1 Bitcoin to B. So as soon as A makes a transaction, it will be sent to the network. And let's take this person M, for example. The first miner will capture this transaction, the software will, it all happens behind the scenes, and he will validate it. The validation happens by looking at A's balance and verifying that A is sending 1 Bitcoin and making sure that A does indeed have that 1 Bitcoin. But since A received 1 from his friend, this transaction would be considered valid. There are other validations that take place, but in this video, I will cover that. So as soon as the transaction is verified, it is stored into a block. And this block is artificially limited to have, let's say, 6 transactions. So we're going to have 6 transactions in this block, because besides the AB transaction, there are others, thousands of transactions that take place. And so M has created this block and validated all the transactions in it and filled this block. As soon as the block is full, it will be sent to the other people who are running the software. They can also look at the transactions, validate them, and just store them for the case of history. Next, there are more transactions that take place because this block is full, so there will be a new block created. And let's have other transactions. Now this person here, N, will go ahead and capture the transactions that come from other users. We'll create a block and then populate it with 5 more transactions. And then as soon as we have 6 transactions, that block will be full and then propagate it to the system. And this actually happens indefinitely. Blocks are being created as transactions go through. And what I have created here is a chain of blocks, which in fact is the blockchain itself. So the blockchain is a database, is a ledger of the transactions between people that everybody can have a copy on their computer. So you can download the blockchain of the Bitcoin and you will have all the transactions that have happened. In fact, you can go back in history and look at the first block with the first transactions. And this is how we verify transactions. So when M wants to verify A's Bitcoin, he can go back in time and look through all the transactions that have taken place and all the times where A appears in the blockchain. And if by the time A wants to send B 1 Bitcoin, if A has that balance, then that will be a valid transaction. Otherwise, it will be rejected. And this is actually the importance of blockchain, because prior to that, we couldn't implement such a system. There was the doublespend problem. The doublespend problem is the following. Let's say A, who has 1 Bitcoin, sends 1 Bitcoin to B. And let's take A again, who has 0 Bitcoin now, sends 1 Bitcoin to C. If we don't have the blockchain, the first transaction goes okay, and the second transaction might go okay if A is a sneaky person and can manipulate the software. C actually has no way of validating if this 1 Bitcoin is valid, since this is virtual money and he just sees an incoming transaction. With the case of Bitcoin, as soon as A makes the transaction to B for 1 Bitcoin, it goes into the blockchain and it's logged forever. When A goes for the second time, the people who are verifying the transaction will see that his balance is 0, and thus this transaction will be declined, while the first one will pass. So the blockchain solves this very important problem of the double spend problem, which was solved by Satoshi Nakamoto when he wrote the paper for Bitcoin. And the importance of the blockchain is that of course, everything is encrypted, and A is not a person, but is just an address that exists as a cryptographic address. And it's actually anonymous. So it's a very useful invention that has a lot of implementations. Besides transactions in the blockchain, we can have pieces of code that have logic and can execute commands whenever needed. Or we can have other documents stored in there for the sake of tracking some information. So the blockchain is still under heavy research, and people are trying to come up with lots of useful use cases that can impact our lives. And we will definitely see a lot of revolutionary stuff coming up on blockchain. So this is essentially blockchain. It's a distributed peer-to-peer transaction log that sits on everybody's computer. Whoever wants to have the blockchain can have a copy, and we, the people, validate and see the transactions that have taken place. So this does not give power to other entities such as PayPal to track who has what. So hopefully you can see the potential in the system and how it can be exploited to bring great technological innovations. Thank you for watching.